Everyone in this post is over age 30, which I mention because you'd think by this age people would have developed some sense of self-awareness and accountability. You'd think. But here we are. I'm engaged to my fiancé, Michael. I'm Asian American. He's white. Before I get into the disaster that just unfolded, I need to give you some context about my culture and why this whole situation has left me absolutely speechless. In my culture, we have what's called a bride price. For those unfamiliar, it's an agreed upon amount of money that the groom pays to the bride's parents, or in cases where the parents are deceased, to a sibling who took care of the bride. It's not a purchase or anything demeaning like some people assume when they first hear about it. It's actually a sign of respect, gratitude, and commitment. It shows that the groom values the bride and appreciates the family that raised her. The amount is always negotiated and agreed upon by both families, and it's meant to honor the years of care, sacrifice, and love that went into raising the daughter. Now, our traditional weddings are elaborate affairs. They typically last 2 days, sometimes even 3, with multiple ceremonies, outfit changes, hundreds of guests, specific rituals that have to be performed at exact times, and enough food to feed a small army. They're beautiful, meaningful, and absolutely exhausting. When Michael and I first started getting serious, I made it crystal clear that I wanted an American wedding instead. Just 1 day, 1 ceremony, done and dusted. He was completely fine with it. Actually relieved, if I'm being honest, because he'd been to one of my cousin's traditional weddings and looked like he'd run a marathon by the end of it. I've told my family this plan multiple times, at least twice to my older sister specifically. We're having an American wedding. Simple, small, our way. But apparently, my sister either wasn't listening or thought I was joking, because what happened a few days ago made it clear she had very different expectations. Before I get to that conversation, you need to understand the family dynamics that led to this moment. I come from a large family, 5 siblings in total. I'm the youngest by a significant margin. My oldest sister, Janet, is the one at the center of this story. There's an 8-year age gap between us. Then there are 3 others scattered in between, all significantly older than me. Growing up, we weren't wealthy, but we weren't struggling either. My parents worked hard, owned a small business, and made sure all of us had what we needed. They had their flaws like any parents, but they loved us fiercely and sacrificed constantly to give us opportunities they never had. Here's where things get complicated and, honestly, where my resentment started building years ago. Right after I finished high school and turned 18, something shifted. It was like my siblings had been waiting for me to hit legal adulthood so they could wash their hands of any family responsibility. One by one, they all essentially vanished from my parents' lives in any meaningful way. This meant that all the burden of taking care of our aging parents fell squarely on my shoulders. My dad had started developing health problems in his 60s. Nothing catastrophic at first, just the normal wear and tear of a life spent doing physical labor. But he needed help with appointments, medications, household tasks he couldn't manage anymore. Did any of my siblings step up? No. It was always me. Dad passed away about 12 years ago now. Heart attack, sudden, devastating. And even in the aftermath of his death, when Mom was drowning in grief and could barely function, my siblings showed up for the funeral, stayed for a week of mourning, and then left again. Left me to pick up the pieces, help Mom navigate her new reality as a widow, manage the business affairs Dad left behind, everything. I was in my early 20s trying to start my career, and suddenly I was also a full-time caretaker. For years I managed. I won't say I did it gracefully or without resentment, because there were plenty of nights I cried from exhaustion and frustration, but I managed because I loved my mom and because someone had to do it. I asked for help. God, did I ask for help? I called my siblings constantly. I sent group texts outlining specific tasks that needed to be done. I tried to schedule visits where they could give me just a weekend of relief. I begged them to at least run errands for Mom when they were in town, pick up her prescriptions, take her to the occasional doctor's appointment, literally anything to lighten the load. Do you know what I got in response? A chorus of, "I'm too busy. I'll try to make it work. Can't you handle it?" And my personal favorite, you're already there anyway, so it makes more sense for you to do it. The excuses were endless. Work was too demanding. Their own kids needed them. They'd help next month. They'd help after this project finished. They'd help after the holidays. The help never came. Even Marcus, who literally lived in the same house with us, barely lifted a finger. He paid nominal rent to Mom and otherwise acted like a tenant in a hotel, not a son living with his aging mother. He'd come home, go straight to his room, and I'd see him at breakfast if I was lucky. When I'd ask him to help Mom with something, he'd sigh like I'd asked him to donate a kidney and then half-ass whatever task I'd given him. Then, 3 years ago, everything changed in the worst possible way. Mom had a stroke. I found her collapsed in the kitchen one morning. It was terrifying, the most scared I've ever been in my life. I called 911, rode with her in the ambulance, and spent 3 days in the hospital waiting to see if she'd survive, let alone recover. She did survive, thank God, but the stroke left her partially paralyzed on her left side and needing extensive rehabilitation and care. The doctors were clear she would need 24/7 supervision and assistance, at least for the foreseeable future, possibly permanently. I called a family meeting, literally gathered everyone together and laid it out. Mom needs serious help now. I cannot do this alone. We need to create a care rotation or figure out a solution together. They all agreed. In that moment, sitting around Mom's hospital room, they all nodded solemnly and promised they'd step up. Janet even cried and said she'd been a terrible daughter, and this was her wake-up call. Marcus promised he'd take on more responsibility since he lived there. Karen and David said they'd each come stay for a week every month to give me breaks. Want to guess how long those promises lasted? Karen came for 3 days a month later, spent most of it on her laptop working remotely, and then said she couldn't do it again because it was too disruptive to her routine. David never came at all, sent some money instead, like that somehow fulfilled his obligation. Marcus helped for maybe 2 weeks before gradually sliding back into his hermit routine. And Janet, despite her tearful promises, visited once in 6 months. I was drowning. Working full-time during the day, coming home to care for Mom at night, waking up multiple times to help her to the bathroom, managing her medications, taking her to endless therapy appointments, advocating for her with insurance companies, and getting maybe 4 or 5 hours of sleep a night if I was lucky. Then, about 18 months after the stroke, Mom started getting confused. At first, I thought it was just the stress and trauma of everything she'd been through, but it got worse. She'd forget conversations we'd had hours earlier. She'd get lost in her own house. She'd sometimes not recognize Marcus, thinking he was one of her brothers who'd passed away decades ago. The neurologist confirmed what I'd been dreading: vascular dementia, likely triggered by the stroke, and it would be progressive. Mom was going to continue declining, and there was nothing we could do to stop it. I was broken. Completely, utterly broken. And still, my siblings were nowhere to be found. I made the hardest decision of my life a year ago. I placed Mom in a nursing home that specializes in dementia and stroke rehabilitation. It killed me to do it. I felt like I was abandoning her, even though logically I knew I couldn't provide the level of care she needed anymore. She required medical supervision I wasn't qualified to give. The guilt still eats at me sometimes. My siblings, of course, had opinions about this decision. Suddenly, they all had thoughts about Mom's care, despite having been absent for years. Janet especially was vocal, saying I was giving up and that family should take care of family. I nearly lost it on her during that phone call. I asked her when exactly she'd been taking care of family, because I must have missed it during the decade I'd been doing it alone. She got quiet after that. I met Michael 4 years ago, right in the thick of everything with Mom. We met at a work conference. Of all places, started talking, and something just clicked. He's kind, patient, funny, and when I told him about my situation with Mom on our 3rd date, expecting him to run for the hills, he instead asked how he could help. He became my rock during the worst period of my life. He'd come over after work and sit with Mom so I could take a walk or just breathe for an hour. He learned how to help her with her exercises. He never complained about our dates being cut short because Mom needed something. He was there in ways my own family wasn't, and I fell in love with him for 100 reasons. But his compassion toward my mother is near the top of the list. When he proposed 8 months ago, I was overjoyed but also relieved. I'd been worried about bringing up the cultural aspects of marriage, particularly the bride price tradition. I wasn't sure how to explain it without it sounding weird or transactional to someone from a completely different cultural background. But when I did explain it to him carefully and thoroughly, he was completely understanding. He actually thought it was beautiful, the idea of formally honoring the family that raised his future wife. He asked thoughtful questions about how it worked, what the expectations were, and made it clear he wanted to respect my culture even as we were planning an American-style wedding. That conversation led to the bride price discussion. Traditionally, it would go to my parents. But Dad is gone, and Mom is in no state to manage money or even understand what's happening anymore. I have power of attorney for her finances and make sure all her care is paid for, her needs are met, and her money is managed responsibly. This meant that if we followed tradition, the bride price would go to a sibling who had cared for me, or alternatively, if no sibling fit that description, the couple could choose to forego it entirely or donate it to a cause that mattered to them. Michael and I had discussed this and decided that since none of my siblings had actually helped raise me in any meaningful way beyond normal sibling interaction when we were kids, and since none of them had helped care for Mom or me during the hardest years, we'd be donating the money to the nursing home where Mom lives. They've been wonderful to her, and it felt right to honor that care rather than give money to siblings who'd been absent. I'd made peace with this decision months ago, and honestly hadn't thought much more about it. The wedding itself wasn't even a priority for us yet. We were engaged, we were happy, we'd get around to serious planning eventually. We were thinking sometime next year, nothing urgent. Then, a few days ago, I got a message from Janet. She was in a chatty mood apparently, asking about how I was doing, what was new, the usual surface-level sister conversation we'd had since she'd emotionally checked out of the family years ago. Eventually, she steered the conversation toward the wedding. Had we set a date yet? Where were we thinking of having it? How many guests? And then she said it. I'm so excited for the traditional wedding. I've already been looking at what to wear for the ceremonies. It's been so long since we've had a proper wedding in the family. I stared at my phone, genuinely confused. I typed back, "What traditional wedding? I told you we're having an American wedding." There was a pause, those 3 dots appearing and disappearing a few times before her response came through. "Oh, I thought that was just the reception part. You're still doing the traditional ceremony first though, right? For Mom's sake? And for the family." For Mom's sake. The audacity of that phrase coming from her made my blood pressure spike. Mom doesn't even know what year it is half the time, and Janet thinks she's going to care about wedding traditions? I took a breath and replied calmly, "No, Janet, I've told you this before, multiple times. We're having one American wedding, one day, one ceremony. That's it." The dots appeared again, and this time there was a longer pause. "But what about the bride price? That's part of the traditional ceremony. Are you skipping that too?" And there it was. The real reason for her sudden interest in wedding planning. The money. I should have just left it there. Should have given some vague non-answer and changed the subject. But I was tired, I was annoyed, and I was done pretending my siblings deserved anything from me. I typed, "Michael and I have decided that since none of my siblings actually helped raise me or care for Mom when she needed it, we're donating what would have been bride price money to Mom's nursing home instead. They've actually been there for her." What came next was a paragraph-long message that I had to read 3 times because I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Janet claimed she deserved the bride price money because she helped take care of me when I was younger. She went on about how she babysat me, helped Mom with me, taught me things, and was basically a second mother to me in my early years. She said that the 8-year age gap between us meant she'd sacrificed her own childhood and teenage years to help raise me, and that this money was owed to her for that sacrifice. I literally sat there with my mouth open, staring at my phone. This woman, who got married at 20 and moved across the country not long after, who'd been absent from my life for any meaningful purpose since I was maybe 9 or 10 years old, who couldn't be bothered to help with our dying father or stroke victim mother, who'd ignored every plea for help I'd sent for over a decade, thought she deserved thousands of dollars because she occasionally babysat me 30 years ago. My brain completely stalled out. I couldn't form a coherent thought beyond sheer disbelief at the entitlement radiating from my screen. I started typing out a long response, detailing every single instance of her absence, every time I'd begged for help and gotten nothing, every broken promise, every excuse. I wrote several paragraphs of justified anger. Then I deleted all of it. Instead, I wrote, "You helped Mom babysit me occasionally until I was about 10. Then you moved away and started your own life. That's normal sibling stuff, not raising a child. You don't get paid for being a normal older sister for a few years. And you definitely don't deserve compensation for abandoning the family when they actually needed help." I didn't wait for a response. I immediately started another message. "Also, you're no longer invited to the wedding. Don't bother asking for details about planning or when it is. You won't be there." Then I blocked her number before she could reply. My phone exploded within hours. Marcus called saying I was overreacting and that Janet was just asking a question. I asked him where he'd been during any of Mom's doctor appointments in the past 3 years. He hung up on me. Karen sent a long email about family harmony and how we needed to forgive each other's shortcomings. I replied with a detailed spreadsheet I'd kept of every time I'd asked each sibling for help and what their response had been. She didn't write back. David took Janet's side, saying I was being cruel and that money was corrupting me. I reminded him he'd literally tried to bribe his way out of helping Mom by sending checks. He said that was different. I asked how. He couldn't answer. My extended family has caught wind of it too, and I'm getting messages from aunts and uncles telling me I need to make peace, that family is family, that Janet didn't mean anything by it. They don't know the full story, of course. They just know there's drama and assume I'm being unreasonable because I'm the youngest and Janet has always been good at playing the victim. Michael has been incredibly supportive through all of this. He told me he'd follow my lead, that these were my family dynamics to navigate, but that he supported whatever decision I made. When I told him I'd uninvited Janet and was considering cutting off the other siblings too, he just hugged me and said, "It's your wedding. Only people who actually love and support you should be there." That made me cry, because it highlighted how simple this should be and how complicated my family has made it. I've spent the past few days thinking about all of this, and I keep coming back to the same conclusion. My sister doesn't deserve that money, and more importantly, she doesn't deserve space at my wedding or in my life. The bride price tradition is about honoring those who raised and cared for you. Janet didn't do that. None of my siblings did. They were around for the easy parts of family, the childhood memories and holiday dinners, but vanished when things got hard. They didn't raise me. They were just present for part of my childhood because we lived in the same house. And when our mother, the woman who actually raised all of us, needed her children to step up, they couldn't even manage that. They left it all to me and then had the audacity to criticize my decisions and feel entitled to money meant to honor caregiving they never provided. Every time I think about Janet's message, that phrase, "I deserve," I feel my blood pressure rise. The entitlement is staggering. The lack of self-awareness is mind-boggling. The sheer nerve to think that babysitting your little sister 3 decades ago entitles you to thousands of dollars in a cultural tradition you clearly don't even understand or respect. She didn't ask if we were doing a bride price. She didn't express interest in the tradition or its meaning. She assumed it was happening and that she'd be getting money. That tells me everything I need to know about her priorities and her view of our relationship. So yes, she's not invited to the wedding, and honestly, as I think about it more, I'm not sure any of my siblings will be invited. Why would I want them there? So they can show up, smile for photos, and pretend we're a close, loving family? So they can enjoy the party while having contributed nothing to my happiness or well-being? No, I'm done with that performance. Michael and I are going to have a small intimate wedding with people who've actually been there for us. His family has been wonderful and welcoming. I have friends who've supported me through everything with Mom. Those are the people who deserve to celebrate with us. As for the bride price money, we're absolutely donating it to Mom's nursing home. They've provided her with dignity, care, and compassion during the most vulnerable time of her life. They've done more for her in 2 years than my siblings did in the decade before that. If the tradition is about honoring caregivers, then they're the ones who deserve to be honored. I know some people will say I'm being too harsh, that family is complicated and I should forgive. But I've spent over a decade being understanding, being patient, picking up the slack, and making excuses for my siblings' absence. I've been the bigger person again and again, and all it got me was more responsibility and more disappointment. There comes a point where you have to stop setting yourself on fire to keep others warm. There comes a point where you have to acknowledge that DNA doesn't obligate you to accept mistreatment or entitlement. There comes a point where you have to choose your own peace and surround yourself only with people who truly care about you. I've reached that point. Janet's message was just the final straw that made me see clearly what I'd been avoiding for years. My siblings don't see me as a person they love and want to support. They see me as a resource, a caretaker, someone who exists to make their lives easier while they contribute nothing in return. And now apparently they see me as a source of money they think they're owed. Well, they're not owed anything. Not my time, not my energy, not my wedding invitation, and certainly not money meant to honor a level of care they never provided. So no, Janet, you don't deserve the bride price money. You don't deserve a lot of things you seem to think you're entitled to. What you actually deserve is to be excluded from events and relationships you only valued when you thought there was something in it for you. This wedding is going to be a celebration of the family Michael and I are choosing to build together, surrounded by people who've chosen us right back. My siblings made their choice years ago when they chose convenience over commitment. They don't get to show up now expecting rewards. And honestly, now that I've made this decision, I feel lighter than I have in years. Cutting out the people who only take from you is freeing in a way I didn't expect. I just wish I'd done it sooner. To anyone reading this who's in a similar situation, dealing with family members who've been absent but now feel entitled to be part of your milestones, you don't owe them anything. Your wedding, your traditions, your money, your choices. Build the life and family you want, not the one obligation tells you that you should want. I'm done feeling guilty for my siblings' failures. This is my life, my wedding, my choice, and I choose joy, simplicity, and people who've actually earned their place in my life. Janet isn't one of them, so yeah, my older sister thinks she deserves my bride price money. She's wrong, and she won't be at my wedding to see where it actually goes, and I'm completely at peace with that.